Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Monday edition of Moohead Radio. I'm your host, a big and furry bovine. Today, we talk about a word that is being bandied about. You know, we go through periods of time where in sports we have words. And I mentioned the other day when we did a show, process. That's a word that just kept getting repeated to death over and over and over again. Every sport has its catchwords that, you know, you kind of let it go in one ear and out the other. The new one is culture. And I hear this all the time. You know, culture. We're trying to change the culture. And we're going to intertwine this into the talk of Cleveland sports. But by the way, if you want to join the program, the links are on both mooheadradio.com in the chat room, where you can also click on the live player. It'll transport you over to YouTube. And there in the YouTube chat, lo and behold, there's also a link to get on the show. So you have no excuses. I have done what I needed to do. All right. The Cleveland Browns are the first team that comes up because every year we have to change the culture. We've been hearing the change the culture conversation for God knows how many years with the Cleveland Browns. Culture is a bad word. And let me explain to you why I consider it a bad word. You know, if a team is 1-31 over a 2-year period and 0-16 last year, it's hard for me to fathom who wouldn't be on board with an improved product. If somebody were coming in and trying to change the culture, I'll tell you what it meant in my business. So you go into a radio station that was losing money and you had to turn it into a radio station that was making money. And what you found, and what I found, you weren't there, I found is that there were people there who were suffering because they were working for a losing company. And, you know, it was kind of the important thing to determine which people were really problems and which people would just be great if things just got better environmentally or if the product suddenly improved. That was my job. That's the owner's job. The Cleveland Browns have a big problem because you're talking about culture and the owner cheated people out of rebate money that they deserved. Oh, and I see Stephen has just jumped into the program. Hi, Stephen.
You know, I wanted to chime in on what you just said. You have a lot of good points in that because, like, you've been in the business of radio before, so you've kind of understand what they mean by culture change. Have you ever noticed when you're driving around and you see some of these stores, it doesn't matter what the store is, it could be retail, clothing store, it'll always have a sign that says new management.
Yeah, right.
That's what a cultural change is. It's like they're implying, oh, we don't have these shitty managers anymore. We got a whole brand new manager. But here's the problem. The store still has no customers.
Yeah, exactly right. Better yet. How about Asian massage parlors? Asian massage parlors. All new girls. That's another, you know. Yeah. I mean, look, you could try to wipe the slate clean any number of ways, but there is a root or a foundation to all businesses. And if your owner cheated people out of money that they deserved, if he hired a bunch of people in the home office of the company who were blatant racists, who were saying blatantly racist things about African-American football players who played for the Cleveland Browns, we know what the foundation is with the Cleveland Browns. And to be very honest with you, it's very difficult. You know, I was lucky because when I came into a situation, all management from the previous company knew they were toast because they were only there by the grace of an absentee owner. Yeah, I didn't buy radio stations that had on-location owners. I bought radio stations that were absentee owned and managed by people. And you know something? There ain't no manager in the world, like you were saying, there ain't no fucking manager in the world who will take it upon himself to handle your business like you do. I mean, there's more on the line as far as, you know,
sometimes you might have had a previous owner in that establishment that might have chased all their customers away. So it doesn't matter if you hire new management, you still got the same shitty ass owner.
When I went into Binghamton, New York, and bought a group of radio stations there, the general manager was a guy named George Sample. And George Sample was a nice enough man, but he was more interested in what label was on the clothes he wore and the fact that he would show off his Rolex watch. And there wasn't a client advertising-wise in the market who didn't think the guy was uppity. And Binghamton was not an uppity town. Binghamton was just kind of a real salt of the earth, community made up of people who were serious about working for a living and knew the value of a dollar. And this guy wasn't it. He was a fish swimming in the wrong pond. Nice guy, but just
there's only one company that can kind of get away with this, and it's only because they're sitting on billions of dollars, and that's Walmart. If you notice, Walmart has some of the shittiest customer service. It don't matter what Walmart you go to. They have some of the most ridiculous customer service I've ever seen. They hire anybody. They hire anybody off the streets. It don't matter. You could be fresh out of prison. You could be selling drugs part-time. They'll hire you, Yeah. And and Walmart always says, well, we're going to put our focus in the customer theft. Like, with loss prevention, they invest a lot of money in the loss prevention department, but their customer service is so horrible that they completely detach from customer service because they're so focused on the customer theft.
Yeah, and what happens with a team like the Browns is when we hear the words change the culture, that's the finger pointing at the players. That's what that is, all right? But let me tell you what else is wrong with the Browns. They have a head coach who lies every 10 minutes, okay? That would be a structural, foundational problem for this organization, having a guy who's not credible, who is the head coach of the team. We had a dysfunctional front office where people weren't communicating. There was all kinds of cracks in the foundation. But when we, in the sports media, as I'm reading it, say, we're making cultural changes, the Miami Dolphins are the team right now that we're reading about making cultural changes. That's how we got Jarvis Landry, right? That's, now why he was a problem, I don't know. So now we got Lawrence Timmons gone, and now Ndamukong Suh will be gone. Now, you can't tell me when they signed Ndamukong Suh for $65 million, they thought they were getting a good citizen and a Boy Scout. For Christ's sake. With the Lions, the guy was the dirtiest player in the league.
He was a dirty player.
My God. Anybody who watched football knew that. They were expecting him to become a Boy Scout. Lawrence Timmons, he's a fucking Steeler. My God. Every linebacker who's ever played for the Steelers is the king of the late hit. So now they're going to make cultural changes. So what are they going to do? Get cream puffs?
Ndamukong Suh was only a sign, and I think for Miami was to try to intimidate the bigger brother, New England, by trying to get, figured if they signed this player, it would put a little fear on them, saying, oh, look, they got a D-line now with Cameron Wake and Ndamukong Suh on the line, and figured, oh, well, here's a guy that's willing to go beyond and above the rules to make sure he gets to the quarterback. And I think it was just an intimidation thing to New England. It ended up not working. It blew up in their faces.
But this is a cultural problem for the Miami Dolphins. It's easy to sit there and say, this guy, all right? And we're making changes and we're cleaning house, all right? That's the Miami Dolphins. The Cleveland Browns are where they're at because they couldn't draft and they couldn't get players. But there's more to this in Northeast Ohio sports. There's the Cleveland Cavaliers, who, if you had the misfortune of watching them yesterday, which I did, so now we have a bunch of new pieces, and they've stopped trying just like the old pieces. And they played no defense whatsoever. They gave up 127 points to a Laker team, and they were letting them just go right through the paint, right to the rim, slam dunking them in, no defense being played whatsoever. And I look at the Cavaliers and I say, you know something? I really don't care if Tyronn Lue is ill. I don't really care about Isaiah Thomas shooting his mouth off. What I care about is why players like J.R. Smith, who clearly are disinterested and don't give a flying fuck, why Tristan Thompson, who's clearly disinterested and doesn't give a flying fuck, why these people have been playing. Why is the head coach, after getting slaughtered on a 12-1 run against the LA Lakers, who were without a couple of pieces themselves, including Ingram and I forgot the other guy who was missing out of yesterday's game. There were two guys on their squad who were important players that were missing. Yeah. And, you know, what did Tyronn Lue go to? He went to his go-to card, which is, well, we got injuries. Oh, woe is us. And he's clapping when he calls a timeout after we go behind at a 12-1 run in the third period that buries us, and he's clapping. It's like, you know, players, coach, fuck that. Fuck the notion that you're either a disciplinarian or you're a players coach. The foundational problem with the Cleveland Cavaliers is that nobody is putting their foot up the ass of these players and saying, this is unacceptable. The owner of this team just put X amount of millions of dollars, and that's in luxury taxes, let alone the hundreds of millions of dollars he's put in player salaries. And this is what we're getting back.
I want to add that the Cavaliers are 6-6 since the new roster has been updated, sort of, if that's the word you want to use. Okay, since acquiring the four new guys that y'all got, right? So the Cavs are 6-6. They're actually scoring less than 2 points per game, and they're actually allowing over 2.5 more points per game. I saw that on ESPN last night. That was a pretty good stat. Their defense has decreased by 0.8 or 0.9, which means they're playing less defense than the original roster y'all had before that. And one thing with the Cavaliers is they're just not consistent. And a lot of those shooters that we talk about, the Rodney Hood, he's kind of been absentee the last couple games. You talk about Jordan Clarkson, his shot is kind of flat broke at times. It's just kind of like he just heaves it up and praying to God and hope it goes in. And he either has a good game or he has a really bad game. Right. And he's consistent on both sides of the ball. And the scary thing is, well, now that this is going to put the pressure on Kevin Love to have to come back a little bit sooner than later to gel this offense together to see what strategy you guys are going to take into the playoffs in these last 15 games.
Well, you know, but here's the bottom line with the Cavaliers. It's, you know, and people are talking, you know, and people on social media are talking about the culture. And you know something? It's not a matter of culture. When new players come into a system and they end up just meandering without purpose. They look like they're zombified and they're following no specific defensive pattern. They're not being coached. Plain and simple. Look, if Tyronn Lue is as ill as I think he is, okay, he should not be the coach of the Cavaliers. All right? And I'm saying this to everybody in the Northeast Ohio media. We can play hush-hush games all we want. The fact of the matter is that the players may make millions of dollars, but this is a rudderless ship. The coach is important. He is glue. There is no glue for the Cleveland Cavaliers right now. You can use the culture word all you want. The word that I use is Jordan Clarkson is a career 32% three-point shooter. Rodney Hood is a career 37% three-point shooter, and both of them shoot below 45% from the floor. Okay? So that means they have good games and they have bad games. If you look at the teams that they played on, they really weren't winning particularly. The Utah Jazz this year has had a nice year, but that's traceable to Donovan Mitchell. That's not traceable to Rodney Hood. Consequently, I look at the players, and there's no reason to assume that these guys are going to come out and be world beaters shooting the basketball. The thing that's disappointing to me is they're not putting out physically. They're not trying defensively. They are without effort. Now, you can use the culture word all you want, but the bottom line is somebody's not doing their job. They're not practicing. The coach is excusing himself from shoot-arounds because he's not well. He looks like death warmed over in the aftermath of games when he has to do the pressers afterwards. He's clearly not in a good physical state. We have a defensive coordinator who is an idiot, who has not succeeded any place that he's been in the NBA. Obviously, it's more than just a few roster changes for younger legs that's needed. We need an infusion of coaching, an infusion of accountability. Instead of this notion of, well, you know, what we've told Rodney Hood is he's got to be himself. What we've told Jordan Clarkson is shoot the ball. You got to be yourself. What kind of a scheme is this? And people wonder, how come we're in ISO all the time? It's because they're being told, hey, you do what you do best.
You know what we're seeing, Mr. Moohead? We're actually seeing right now the effect of the Kyrie Irving trade. Because if you looked at last year and the year before that, when y'all won the finals, you saw how Kyrie Irving distribution of the ball and kind of, you know, LeBron playing off of his energy kind of helped all the other players around kind of find their places on the court. And after that Kyrie trade after he left, there's not that second go-to guy that LeBron has. So you just got a bunch of below average players at best trying to figure out what their role exactly is on both sides of the ball. And it seems like there's just a big confusion there, you know?
Well, I mean, there's a lot, and Brian Hallman is saying the Cavs are at the same point they were when James left the first time, except he has too many miles on his odometer to keep overcoming average play from his teammates. You know, I guess the way I look at it is this. It is you're going to have to start over anyway. And obviously this was not an era. We were hoping for a Cavaliers era, and the era was 4 years. Okay, that's what we got, and that's what it is. I'm seeing teams winning, and I'm looking at specifically at the Indiana Pacers, teams that are winning and have an almost identical or better record than the Cleveland Cavaliers. And it's not that they have better talent. It's that they are running a scheme, that they're running a system. And Utah is another good example. They're fighting for the playoffs. And what do they really have? A rookie leading the show. And, you know, I'm seeing a lot of teams that are in that 37-29 kind of record out west and even in the East. And they're doing it without bench players, without depth, but they're running a discernible scheme. The Cavaliers, on the other hand, are not running any system that I can see whatsoever. So, you know, it bothers me, I think, more than anything, this whole notion of cultural change, that the finger gets pointed at the players. But, you know, here's what I know as owner of a business. If you come in, and believe me, I walked into a lot of 1 in 31 radio stations. Okay, that was my job. That was my business. Buy low, sell high. That's what I did. So when I walked into a place, I knew what I was getting into, man. And it's like, shit, the first thing I got to do is I got to find out who the rotten eggs are and get those people the hell out, because there are some people who legitimately just have a bad attitude who bring everybody down. But, you know, I would say 90%, 90, and this is a large number, and this is an average of my years in business. 90% of the staffs that I inherited, I kept. And the reason was they really wanted to win. It wasn't that but they didn't know how. They didn't have a product that they felt confident about. They didn't feel that there was anybody in the building to lift them up and to help them achieve what they needed to achieve. People either adapt or they don't adapt to a proper culture. If you are doing everything as an owner and as a manager correctly to keep people motivated, to keep things fresh, to keep people enthused, and if those people can't adapt, if people who are 1 in 31 with the Cleveland Browns, if they can't get sold on a regime that gets them 5 or 6 wins next year, then the fuck with them. But that won't be the case. 90% of the players are going to start gaining confidence, and they're going to become better football players because they're going to realize they're not stranded on Gilligan's Island anymore.
Father always told me attitude reflects leadership.
Yeah, I mean, and in the end, that's what happens. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen teams that were not very good suddenly become better teams. And it's like, you give the Philadelphia Eagles Carson Wentz, okay? You give them Carson Wentz, and you just the tide rises. It's like, oh my God, we got a guy who can get the ball to these people now. We got a guy who's consistent. It's amazing how buoyant players' attitudes can become. And these are hardened multimillionaire free agent type guys, but when they're playing on a team that is suddenly doing well, their level rises. And when the culture is screwed up because ownership or management is not providing the proper kind of incentives and motivation, and some of it's tough love, and some of it's, warm love, and some of it is putting your money where your mouth is. Some of it is investing in your product. Dan Gilbert's invested in his product. I mean, but unfortunately, we don't have players who are confident in the system, whatever that is, that they're running, so much so they're not running it. And for whatever reason that is, and I think it's because they're not being forced to. So,
Mr. Moohead, my question, or I just want to kind of just rebuttal off of what you just said, not to counteract what you're saying, because I agree with what you're saying.
No, we like discussion.
You know what it's like to have in a toxic environment, and sometimes you have just some employees that are there that have been toxic for so long because the system in place, it kind of reinforces that. So my question is, if I'm an outsider looking in like an investor, and you were to own the Cleveland Browns, and I was to do my homework and say, okay, well, you guys have been around before 99, but I'm talking about since Art Modell moved the team and then y'all inherited this new, whatever team you want to call them, since 1999 to this point. I'm looking at it. You've had 3 owners. You've had multiple COO presidents. You've had multiple head coaches. You've had over 50 quarterbacks. And you've had so many regime changes. And it seemed like every new regime that comes in is worse than the one prior.
Yep.
So my question is what does that tell you when you go through so many owners? Because in 20 years, 3 owners, that's a lot. That's a lot for a franchise. I mean, that's a lot of owners. And your COO president, you have like 8 of them. Then your GMs, you have like 6 of them. Then your head coaches, you have like 12 of them. And then quarterbacks, you've had like 40 of them. So what does that tell you? Like what does that tell you when you say cultural change? What is that? What is that small increment right there tell you? Like that 20-year span of all these new regimes coming in, is that a poisonous environment, or is that just bad luck in drafting the wrong or hiring the wrong people?
Well, a lot of it has to do with belief. And, I just, I'm a boxing historian. I can tell you about fighters who won titles, and once they won a title, they became twice as good a fighter because they believed in themselves. I've watched people who overachieved because they reached a certain pinnacle. I've seen other guys who, when they reach the pinnacle, get fat and lazy, Buster Douglas, after knocking out Mike Tyson, and laying down for Evander Holyfield. Every athlete is different. Every athlete, some guys will go, Isaiah Thomas is a guy who, he had a quasi good game against the Cavaliers yesterday, but he's still shooting 37% for the field for the year. And his comment is, I want to put on a show. It is me. He's not talking about making the Lakers better. He's still wanting to put on a show so the Brinks truck will back up and pay him out. I mean, there are some guys who never get it. But what you're describing the last 20 years for the Cleveland Browns, why do you think Joe Thomas hasn't told the Browns whether he's retiring or not? I mean, because Tyrod Thomas isn't enough. He wants to see just what in the hell this team is going to do with free agents. He wants to see how serious this is before he puts his body on the line for one more year. He's not sure what he's going to do, But you know something? It's going to take more than Tyrod Thomas to do it.
You know, for Joe Thomas to commit to the Cleveland Browns.
Or Tyrod Taylor, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, for Joe Thomas to commit to the Cleveland Browns and say, I want to, play the rest of my years here. I would like employees like that to work for me, because even if the production wasn't necessarily great on the field in terms of wins, to have an employee like that work for you, that's what your ride or die employee or whatever you want to call it. I wish if they had more players like that on the field, I think they could possibly kind of change that locker room morale around and get a little bit more positive energy. I think it'd be a good start.
Well, to me, we knew that the LeBron James thing was going to be a distraction. We knew that. But before I get into that, Brian Hallman says leadership has to start from the top, not the bottom. Ron Shane is saying the Cavs are not playing hungry. Daktar's on acid. He wants LeBron James to the Wizards for John Wall. That's great. There's a great attitude player. Amsterdam is saying Martini from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest played better D than the Cavs. And
let's go put you on the spot, Mr. Moohead. My father just texted me and asked me,
"Yep,
you think the Cavs should have exercised talking LeBron into being traded instead of trading Kyrie Irving and telling Kyrie Irving, look, we'll give you the keys to the city. You're the man. This guy's going to be gone after a year."
Well, there has been a floating story. What's your dad's name?
Well, his name's Bobby, but he's watching, but he's not commenting on there because he's on his cell phone.
Hey, Bobby, I'm more than happy to share some info with you. The story going around on the inside about Kyrie Irving is that Kyrie Irving threatened the Cavaliers, of course, that he was going to have surgery if they didn't trade him. But the underlying fact is that Kyrie Irving needs knee surgery. It's not a difficult procedure. It's probably an arthroscopic thing. Kyrie Irving has missed a couple of games recently because of a sore knee. He's going to miss some more, he just stated. All right? Kyrie Irving couldn't have cared less about the keys in Cleveland, because then he would have been whining about the fact that in Cleveland, without LeBron James, if they didn't win, then he would be the bad guy. He wants to be a hero going into another situation. He went into a situation where he was going to be El Hombre. He was going to be the man. You weren't going to get LeBron James to waive his trade clause in his the non-trade clause in his contract. That was not going to happen. The problem is this is a three-ring circus, and I know that LeBron hangs in the balance, and I think a lot of people would recognize that that is a large distraction. But even at that, when you own a business, if I had the best morning personality in the radio station, and that guy got an offer to go to Chicago, Illinois, I'd kiss him on the cheek and say, best of luck, babe, because anybody who gets to the number 1, number 2, or number 3 market in America, you've earned it, buddy. I have to then scramble to find myself a really good young morning person to replace that guy. That is incumbent upon me as the owner. And the same thing is true with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They have to find a way to go on living without LeBron. And it's not a pleasant prospect. And in the NBA, it's damn near impossible. But what they need to do is to field a competitive roster, not like the first time LeBron left, but a competitive enough roster. But we have to have a coach who institutes a scheme so that the team has an identity. You can't just say, we're going to run up and down the floor, and that's our identity. Transition, transition, transition. That's our identity. I mean, that's Paul Westhead. That's Loyola Marymount. I mean, I don't know, and that was a long time ago. That was Bo Kimball, and that was Hank Gathers. And I mean, that was another era. All right. You've got to have more of a system than just that. So I don't think there is a way out of the LeBron dilemma. I think that this is true. It's true of Tom Brady. If Tom Brady just decided that he and his wife decided that's enough for me, I mean, the New England Patriots would have Brian Hoyer as their starting quarterback. I mean,
do you think the addition of Kevin Love will make any changes to this motivation? Will you think more, or is it just what you see is what you get on the court right now?
No, I would say that it would be more likely to promote another panic attack in Kevin Love. I mean, this is not a comfortable environment. This is not the kind of environment that somebody is going to walk into and play savior. If LeBron James can't get it to gel, Kevin Love's not going to be able to get it to gel. The fact is that the players are confused. They're not communicating. They don't know what it is they're supposed to do. There was a play in yesterday's game where Lonzo Ball just went right down the lane without the ball. They just passed to him and he dunked it in. And you could see that George Hill and Larry Nance Jr. weren't even looking at each other. They weren't talking, and neither of them covered him. He just waltzed into the rim and stuffed it in. And we've been seeing that all year with different characters, different casts, same result.
Do you think this says a lot about LeBron, though? I mean, because a lot of people said that he's horrible at communicating with his players, and when he does, it doesn't rub off the right way, and players tend to get a resentment against him. You know, do you think that the way this team is gelling, not being able to figure out, and this has been going on for a while, even with the old regime, do you think this says a lot about LeBron as a communicator on the court?
My experience from years of covering this guy is that when he's quiet is when things are the worst. Usually he would have some kind of a rambunctious, kind of outpouring of emotion, or he would go, and start Instagramming and tweeting, little digs at people. But when
tirade.
LeBron is quiet, that means, it's kind of like San Antonio's looking a whole lot better. That's really what LeBron being quiet means. I think LeBron is capable of communicating when he needs to communicate. I think the problem here, and I'm going to go on record with this and leave it where it lies, is that I think there is a major problem with Ty Lue's health. I think that it is going to be exposed after the season. I think that a lot of what you're seeing with the Cavaliers team is just a lack of cohesion. I think that there is a reason for why all of this is happening, and we're going to learn what that reason is after the season. And it'll come soon enough. Because
Steve Kerr took like 50 games off for like a back injury. Why can't Tyronn Lue? Why can't he just take a 5-game leave of absence? You got 15 games.
Well, because one thing we knew about Steve Kerr is what was wrong with him. They didn't have a problem with saying that it was back surgery went bad with Steve Kerr. And so we knew that he was physically unable to sit during the course of games. We also know that he was having a lot of pain management issues, and it was very much above board what was going on with his health. With Ty Lue, this has really been swept under the rug. I am after every person from Brian Windhorst on down, all right? And I can't get a peep out of these people. Nothing. I mean, and there have been, at least in the last month, 4 different occasions where Ty Lue has either missed games, missed halves of games, missed shoot-arounds, missed practices because he was, quote, ill. I don't know what it is. All I know is when people are hush-hush about this type of thing, it's usually more than what is being said, which in this case is nothing.
Oh, my father had one more question to ask. You don't mind? He said, is there any way you can sell LeBron on staying if the Cavs do not win the championship this year?
Well, the Cavs are not going to win the championship this year. And I think the real damning part is that I think that the future of the organization is in real flux, partially because of LeBron and partially because of the Kyrie trade, and partially because the guys we got, that Rodney Hood will become a free agent. He's not going to be around. So there is still going to be uncertainty as to who's on the team, who's not on the team. Question marks about, J.R. Smith and Tristan Thompson, whether the organization even wants these men back or whether they're going to trade them for a bag of marbles. There's a lot of things that are in flux right now. And all of that points to LeBron James leaving. Why would LeBron want to be in flux when he can go to 3 or 4 different places that are at least cemented? They have a solid foundation. Right now, the foundation is crumbled in Cleveland, and it's unfortunate, but being realistic, and not just being a negative Nancy fan, but just being realistic, you can see that the team, I think, honestly, if the team committed itself and played hard, they would be, instead of 6-6, I think that they would be 8-4.
Yeah.
But that's a big difference when you start adding games. I mean, playing at that kind of a record, would secure you the number 3 position in the playoffs. But they're heading in the wrong direction. So
they're saying LeBron's top 4 spots, landing spots, is Cleveland, Philadelphia, Lakers, and Rockets. And I don't want him coming to Houston now. I'm saying this as a Rockets fan because I feel like there's no way that you can balance James Harden and LeBron James together on the court, because you got 2 players that are going to want the ball more than the other. And I think there's going to be a massive ego problem between those two. And then having to ask Chris Paul to play off the ball too. And I just think when you got 3 egos on the court like that, it's hard to manage all 3 at the same time. And, like the OKC Thunder, same thing there. You got 3 guys that all want to have their moment, and they can't figure out who's the go-to guy, which obviously should be Westbrook, but Melo and Paul George tend to want their shots as well. So you can see why, they're sitting at 6 in the West, and they're barely like 8 games above 500, and they're struggling with those 3 guys. So that's why I feel like it could be that effect in Houston as well. I think the best landing spot for LeBron James, even though it wouldn't expand on his brand name, I think San Antonio with Greg Popovich, who has had enormous success, 5 national championships, 6 NBA Finals appearances. Plus, since he's been the head coach since '98, when he took over for, I think, was it Brian Hill? If I'm correct, he took over Brian Hill's position in the '97 season when they went 20-62. So other than that year, when he inherited the team, they've made the playoffs for 20 straight years. And actually that streak's in jeopardy this year, even though they're 8-9 games above 500.
Yeah, well, here's the deal. You've got the Kawhi Leonard problem in San Antonio, which, Kawhi Leonard, for all the hype that they tried to give him on the national networks, is not LeBron James. All right. Kawhi Leonard is an overachieving player, but Kawhi Leonard has missed a lot of games, and, Pop is pieced together a season without him. LeBron James respects Popovich and would play for him. And that is the intriguing part of San Antonio, is that LeBron would be in a system that is a clear-cut, defined system, and walking into a culture where Popovich is a strong leader, instead of playing in an environment where Ty Lue is hanging on by his fingernails with his job, like David Blatt did before him and like Mike Brown did before him. Coaches have a way of, caving into LeBron James. And I think sometimes the rudder of the ship that's needed, that might be what LeBron James, at this part in his career, needs to go to a place that has a better scheme and a better system, and one that he can bring his intangibles to, and the 2 things can expand instead of clash. I think that's a logical landing spot for him too. I don't see, the Rockets. I don't see the Warriors. I don't see the Thunder. I don't see, I'm not seeing. Everybody wants to go with where the superstars already are. And I think that, something, when LeBron James decided to come back to Cleveland, Kyrie Irving was not a superstar. He came back here because he felt he had unfinished business. And I think at this point, what is up next for LeBron? I'd say that LeBron ain't going to stick with a losing organization that's foundation has crumbled. I think that he's as good as gone. But I felt that way in the beginning of the season, that, everything that's happened since is only further cemented my belief. But I believe that's the case.
Yeah, I would try to hire a new coach for Cleveland and just say, look, LeBron, I know we're rebuilding, and if you could sign another year or 2, that'd be great. Anything to sell us going forward, I would tell him, look, you can hire the next head coach. I don't care. I'll let you, just basically like let him be the GM, kind of like make the decisions on the players that are coming in. If he likes it, if he doesn't. But I don't think that may not completely sell them 100% because I guess they did that to him the last time and it didn't work. So.
Well, I mean, Mark Jones is in the chat room saying the Cavs will not make the finals. I mean, the Eastern finals. I think the Cavaliers are going to get wiped out in the first round. I just don't think this team is ready to play. I don't think emotionally their heart is obviously not in it. This is not a flip the switch kind of thing. And if they think that Kevin Love coming back is going to suddenly bring back the good times, these guys are not smiling on the court. Kyle Korver made reference to the fact that there's just simply not enough smiles to go around. But like I said at the time that the trades were made for Larry Nance Jr. and Clarkson and Rodney Hood, at first it sounds cool. But when you're playing for the Lakers and you've lost for how many years, or if you're playing for the Utah Jazz and you're not getting into the playoffs, and now all of a sudden you're going to a team that's expected to make a deep playoff run and the microscope is on you and you're in the spotlight, it is not an easy thing. And I think that these players now have woken up to the reality that this isn't like an assured, definite thing. And I think that they now realize how deep the water is, and the way they're responding is checking out.
You guys started 3-1 in the stretch, and then after that, you went 3 for 5. So y'all been 3-5 since then.
Yeah, it's bad, but it isn't just the results; it's the alarming number of points we're giving up, the lack of resistance, the lack of focus on the court, the just the lack of running plays on the court. It's just. I have never seen LeBron James play with a group of players before who were disjointed like they've been all year this year. And it doesn't help that, some of your guys are missing. But I got to tell you, Jeff Green has just checked out. Yep. I mean, this is why he's played for so many teams. We're starting to realize why some of these players, why George Hill, who can't hit open shots, why these guys have played for as many teams as they've played for. And it's simply because they're really not that good.
What about Osman? I say it's Osman, right?
Cedi Osman.
Cedi Osman, like he was pretty good the first couple of games, and I even thought maybe he was going to be put in a starting lineup, and then all of a sudden I haven't never heard from him since.
Well, Cedi Osman popped his hip flexor and is gone for 2 weeks. One thing that I will say about Cedi Osman is that he's worked on his game, and he's been one of the few enthusiastic ones. If you look at who LeBron was responding to, it was Cedi Osman and Larry Nance Jr. He's not responding to anybody else. He wants nothing to do with J.R. Smith whatsoever, and J.R. Smith was his buddy. J.R. Smith was his workout partner during the off seasons. And now, I mean, he doesn't even want to make eye contact with the guy. And George Hill looks like you have a Ty Lue saying, we got to push the pace. And you've got a guy who played in Indiana for so long, he's halfway up Vogel's ass. I mean, the guy is, he looks like he's going to push the ball up the court, then he pulls it out. And, it's kind of like a porn star. You think he's going to stay in, and then he pulls it out. It's, to me, he looks like the wrong guy. He, for some reason, we're sticking with George Hill at that position, and he's not setting anybody up, and he's not pushing the tempo. The team has no identity. They have a point guard who's playing a half-court game, and they have a bunch of guys who want to run up the floor, and other guys like Kyle Korver who want to shoot from the outside but need screens and plays to do it, and they're not running plays. I mean, the whole thing is disjointed. I've never seen LeBron James in an environment like this before. Yep. And who can blame him for wanting to get out? Yeah. Ron Shane is saying James needs to buy the team and still play, hire his own big guns. The bottom line is, I would say, that would be a possibility, but Dan Gilbert ain't giving up. I mean, Dan Gilbert is not going to do that. So, this is what it boils down to, I guess, is, all the culture talk in the world. And whether it's the Miami Dolphins, I mean, Adam Gase has to step up in Miami, and he has to be able to determine, and his front office with him and his general manager, what do you want the Miami Dolphins to be? Who do you want them to be? Do you want them to be the Ryan Tannehill Express? What do you want them to be? I mean, what is the identity? If you think of the Miami Dolphins, who are they? Where do they put their hat when they come home? I see no identity for teams like this. And if you're just saying, oh, we're going to get rid of a bunch of guys who are miscreants or misbehaviors, my God, there are a lot of misbehaviors who are making massive contributions for their teams because they have management who will hold them accountable. Here's another good example for you, Stephen. Mm-hmm. We didn't get to this in the last show because Danny Shelton was still a Cleveland Brown, and now Danny Shelton is, with the New England Patriots.
I see that. Yeah.
Had somebody stuck to their guns and said to Danny Shelton, God damn it, we told you, lard ass, to lose weight, and you decided to gain weight. Fuck you. He ends up playing 1 out of every 3 snaps on defense because he's morbidly obese and he's of no value on the field in passing situations. So when people saw him on the field, they just pass on first down. Danny Shelton couldn't get around his man. I mean, he's a 3-4 guy, and we got Greg Williams as a head coach who's my God, what he is. He's a 4-1-6. He's a 4-3. He's a 3-4. He's a 3-8. And Danny Shelton is just this big fucking fat fire hydrant standing in the middle of the field. And if you run into him, he will stop you. If you run away from him, he will have a heart attack.
So I'm just curious, with Tyrod Taylor now running the offense, and you got Corey Coleman, you got Joshua Gordon, you got the receiver, what was it from I can't think of his name, from Miami. What was his name?
Jarvis Landry.
Jarvis Landry. Are y'all going to be a run first team, a pass first team? What do you expect? Because I mean, if y'all draft Saquon Barkley, what do you expect how the offense is going to run based on those players?
Well, based on Tyrod Taylor, it's not going to be a huge downfield throwing thing. And that's what's odd about why they kept Way. I have no idea why Hugh Jackson is still the coach of this team, because he obviously prefers throwing the ball downfield, and Tyrod Taylor is not that guy. Tyrod Taylor is a guy who limits mistakes, he limits turnovers, and he averages short distances per pass, which matches what Jarvis Landry does, but he's not a threat to throw the ball deep. So my belief is, if you're handing the reins for a season or two to Tyrod Taylor, you better be able to run the football, because you're not going to be able to get big tracts of land by big offensive strike plays. You're going to grind it out. He's going to be a game manager. You're going to try to keep them, that defense that Greg Williams started to improve last year. You're going to try. You get rid of Danny Shelton because you got Ogunjobi and you got Coley, and those two guys are younger and they're not morbidly obese. So those guys are going to come in and do a certain job for you. You're going to try to get your defense to keep games close enough. You're going to try to build up your defensive secondary so that you can get teams off the field. And then you're going to give the ball to Tyrod and say, we've got a couple of good receivers here. We got Josh Gordon, we got Jarvis Landry. You got Corey Coleman, but we are still in the process of talking to Terrell Pryor, which I'm holding my head. But the fact of the matter is, we're going to give him some large bodies, David Njoku, some large bodies to throw the ball to and move the chains. But part of that has to be a running game. You have to have offensive linemen. I see that Solder is now being courted by the Browns, the New England Patriots left tackle. I think he's a right tackle that the Browns might want to move to the left side. But honestly, because they're not sure if Joe Thomas is coming back.
Wow. So they're saying he may not come back at all?
They're not sure. Nobody knows, but the Browns have to proceed in free agency like he's not, because he's not committing. And they feel the longer this goes, the greater the likelihood is that he's retiring. And if that's the case, you've got to have a left tackle, and it can't be Spencer fucking Drango. It's got to be somebody who can stay in front of his man. So you're going to have to invest somewhere in this draft in young offensive linemen and see if you can do a job to plow a path for some running backs. And that's that. You also have Duke Johnson to throw to out of the backfield. Tyrod Taylor has some big targets. The problem is that a lot of those big targets, like Josh Gordon, if he's right in the head, like to run downfield and make big plays. But this is going to be an offense with Todd Haley calling the plays that I think you're going to find that there's going to be more crossing patterns. There's going to be more utilization of Njoku inside instead of down the field on the sidelines. You're going to have an occasional quick strike play, but you're going to do what you can to get multiple receivers out into the pattern, and you're going to try to throw 8 to 10 yard passes. And sandwich in between that, you're going to have to run the football. So I took flack today on Twitter because, I used the expression franchise running back, and everyone said, what is this, 1957? And it's like, if I went in and did a historical search, Stephen, about quarterbacks who were picked number one in the NFL draft, which ones of them won Super Bowls? Because these idiot fans are talking about Super Bowl, and I say, are you crazy? The Cleveland Browns didn't win a football game last year. We're not talking about Super Bowl. We're looking at 5 wins, 6 wins. We're trying to get back to respectability.
Yeah.
But Terry Bradshaw back from 1970 was one of them. I'm just picking these off the top of my head. John Elway was 1983. He was one of them. Eli Manning in 2004. He was one of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Troy Aikman in 1989. He was one of them. And I'm trying to think of who the other guy was who was drafted one who ended up winning a Super Bowl. But I think there were 5 quarterbacks that we're talking about who actually accomplished it. And that's in the last 40 plus years. And they want to bank on going number one with a quarterback. Like that's going to be their shortest route to the Super Bowl. Here's my friend and here's his friend for you. And the two of them, they're 3-dimensional.
Well, I understand where they're coming from because like you in the draft, when you draft a quarterback, essentially you want to have that one where you hit a jackpot where he plays 17 years, and you want to draft a running back where he can at least last 6 to 7 years. Because I know running backs have a shorter lifespan, but in this draft right here in particular, and even in the past drafts, even since 04, since Eli Manning, there hasn't really been a quarterback in the draft that just was a jackpot quarterback kind of guy that's going to get you to the Super Bowl right there and then,
Well, I can tell you, Dan Marino never got it done, and Jim Kelly never got it done.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
And it is unfortunate. They were very good quarterbacks, and Dan Fouts didn't get it done. There are lots of guys who had long careers. But you see, I don't want to hear the Super Bowl talk. I am so wasted about talking about something that is just not even realistic. It's not even practical. Playoffs isn't even practical to be talking about. We're talking about a young quarterback who's going to sit behind Tyrod Taylor, for God's sakes. That's where we're at. And we have to start developing a concept for this team. And you know something? Ben Roethlisberger, I can look at the years that he performed well, either won the Super Bowl or went deep into the playoffs, and I can always find a Jerome Bettis, a Le'Veon Bell. I can always find a fucking running back. But when he didn't have a running back, when they were doing running back by committee like the Browns do every year, and poor Ben was back there throwing 50 times a game, they were not winning. Plain and simple. So this rot that I'm hearing on social media about why you have to choose a quarterback number one is bullshit. If you think Saquon Barkley is a guy who is like an Adrian Peterson kind of talent, or an Eric Dickerson kind of talent, you've got to pull the trigger. You've got to get it done. And even if it means waiting another 2 years or whatever for your young quarterback, the fact of the matter is you've got to start putting players on the field now, and you've got to start lining them up so that when you do get the guy that you want at quarterback, the only reason I can get from people is what you just said, Stephen. It's like, well, year after year goes by and we don't get a quarterback. We don't get a quarterback. We don't get a quarterback. And, meanwhile, the Detroit Lions are still looking, all right? I mean, the fact of the matter is that if you build up your team, I mean, Dorsey built up his team around Alex Smith and made the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to get better? And then when you get better, maybe then you'll hit the jackpot and find a good young quarterback once you start putting better pieces on the field. But it ain't going to happen this way if you got an empty roster. It ain't going to happen.
You're right. And you can get a quarterback all you want, but if you don't have the surrounding pieces to help your quarterback is only as good as your receivers, your offensive line. I mean, he can only be so productive, So you got receivers, you got a decent quarterback already. You draft an extra running back, maybe draft some offensive linemen to help with that run blocking, because I know Cleveland's been lacking a run blocking scheme for a while. And maybe maybe we can see where this goes this year. Get the ball rolling in the right direction.
Well, we had a great running scheme when Shanahan was here. We had the zone blocking scheme, and even Isaiah Crowell ran for 1,300 yards. I don't know. I mean, if you have a system in place and you find the right players who can play that system, you're going to be successful in the league. And I'd be the first one to tell you that there are running backs who are below Saquon Barkley who will become very, very good NFL running backs. All of this is contingent that you run a scheme and you don't play right tackles at left tackle, that you don't play guards at center. You've got to have people who can run the system that you want to run. Now, Matt Ogden is saying if LeBron leaves the Cavs, he should join an Eastern Conference team. Well, yeah, obviously that would give him a clear line to the finals. If his goal is strictly to end up in finals, and if he's still trying to chase the ghost, as he refers to Michael Jordan as, then that's what he will do. Amsterdam says the Browns need 2 offensive tackles. That is correct. Obviously, Coleman on the other side is no better than Drango. And Ron Shane says, I fear any quarterback for the Browns offense. Right now, the way it stands, yeah. But I mean, again, you've got to have people who have certain skills in your offensive line that you got to play to players' strengths. You can't just come in and say, okay, I'm going from a 4-3 to a 3-4 and bring fat Danny Shelton in and then fail for 1 year and then say, okay, we're going back to a 4-3 and then fat Danny Shelton has to go. I mean, you got to understand what players are capable of doing what. Danny Shelton turned into Refrigerator Perry. The only difference is he's not sitting around with a fishing pole in his hand. I mean, that's what happened to him. The guy's got a weight problem, man. He's
your offensive line. Like, if you can go through your current starting offensive line, is there any of them you don't like currently?
Yeah, the 2 that I don't like are Coleman and Drango, and the other guys I can live with. Treader, I can live if healthy with Zeitler, and if Joe Thomas wanted to play another year, I could live with him. But it's the other 2 guys that are just inept, and all it takes is one. But if you have one on each side, I mean, Jesus Christ, I mean, there's no way. Amsterdam says, I bet Joe will not play, and it's starting to look more and more like that. Mark Jones says, I love everything done under Dorsey so far. The problem is that we still have Huey. And Matt Ogden says, Huey will be gone for you guys soon. Brian Hallman, John didn't have a choice in firing or keeping Huey, the revolutionary head coach. Dorsey did let Danny Shelton go to a winning team, so that was kind of nice of him. I mean, I don't know if you heard this, but did you hear that John Elway sold his Papa John's franchises?
I didn't know John. I know I heard Peyton Manning.
Oh, I'm sorry, Peyton Manning. I'm sorry, that's right. Yeah,
about his
he sold all the Denver area ones.
I kind of saw that coming. I mean, all the criticism they're receiving after what Big Papa said. So Mr. Papa John stuff. So I can understand why Peyton Manning.
There is a reason why he did it, and people don't know the inside reason. The reason is he took the money that he made, and he made good money from the transaction, and he's investing in the New England area Golden Corrals now that Danny Shelton is playing for them. Thank you very much.
I want to say this, Mr. Moohead. A lot of people have been saying, well, why don't you just hire Peyton Manning as GM? But see, here's the thing. You see a lot of these players like the Jordans and stuff like that, who were once players, try to become owners or become a position in the front office, and it just never panned out. And I just think like Peyton Manning's kind of fool's gold. It's like, he was a good player on the field, but how do you know it's going to transition to the office? And I just feel like, it's just kind of hard to go on that, because you've seen a lot of these players who became front office managers and it just didn't pan out.
Well, John Elway's still looking for a quarterback, and flies are going in and out of his mouth as we speak. I mean, the fact of the matter is, John Elway, old horse mouth, obviously doesn't recognize a good young quarterback when he sees one. I mean, this is not duck soup. This is not easy. There is a degree of luck that comes with this. But you know something? Even if you were the luckiest man in the world and you found the next Tom Brady, if he's being protected by Spencer Drango and Sean Coleman, it makes no fucking bit of difference because he ends up in a body bag before he becomes Tom Brady. People don't understand. You don't know when lightning's going to strike, but you better put the best team on the field that you can in the hopes that luck is going to hit at some point. It's what happened with Bernie Kosar. Bernie Kosar came here and his offensive line was set, man. When Bernie Kosar got here in 1984, 85, in that time frame, we already had guys on the offensive line who were really, really good. And we don't have that right now.
Yeah.
Don't wish that on a young quarterback because it won't help the team.
It's like Tony Rizzo said about Ben Roethlisberger. If he would have got drafted to the Browns, he'd be a career backup quarterback somewhere else. It would have been terrible for him over in Cleveland.
Well, and that's because that's where the inability to draft has really hurt us. I mean, we're not filling positions with quality players with all the picks that we've had. And then we had Sashi, the salesman, I called him. He's the guy who, you know what he was like? He was like the magician who starts with one rabbit, and he pulls out 3 rabbits from the hat. He makes 1 rabbit into 3. But the thing is, what they don't see is backstage, all 3 rabbits die. Okay. I mean, it's like, instead of 1 fucking strong rabbit that he does a goddamn trick with, he ends up with 3 dead rabbits. And that's what Sashi Brown did. Oh, I can get you more picks, and then proceed to pick a bunch of dead rabbits. That's what he did.
My dad said this whole idea on hiring analytics and all these baseball guys into Cleveland almost seemed like a comedy Saturday night skit where it was like, hey, we're just going to hire these baseball guys to overturn our football franchise. But except, oh, shit, this is really happening,
Only a guy like Jimmy Haslam, who has no idea about football, could ever be, I mean, you get talked into God knows what shit, and it's like, we're going to do things differently. And it's like, well, that's a good idea to do things differently, seeing as how you've sucked for 2 decades. But something differently, you know what that's like saying? It's like, something, I'm overweight and I'm not the most handsome guy and I'm not getting laid. Okay. I mean, so what am I going to do? I got to do something different.
Jimmy Haslam is 20-76 as an owner.
That's right. I got to do something different. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start dressing in 70s disco clothing and go out because it's different. And you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to find every gay man that I can find, and I'm going to try gay sex. And the reason I'm going to try it is because it's different. You see, I wasn't having any of that heterosexual luck. So maybe my luck will have, that's what this whole analytics thing was. It was like, got to do something different. We got to convince the fan base that we're doing something different. Try hiring people who know how to draft. Try hiring a war room.
My dad just told me, if you're going to hire analytics guys, he said, what's next? Jimmy reaches a settlement with the truckers and gives them front office positions.
I mean, there's lots of things in the world that are different, and that doesn't make them good. I mean, there is some common wisdom in the world, and you know what it's like. It's kind of like, why don't people put peanut butter on spaghetti? It's different, but it's not any good. Okay, that's kind of really, that's why. I mean, how about things like why we don't put chocolate sauce on pizza? Different is not always better. And this is what we run into in Cleveland. And at least now we have a guy who's done the job before. The problem is he's just brought in a veteran quarterback who's a short ball thrower with a revolutionary head coach who probably is sitting there, with as relatively large a hard-on as he can have in his trousers when he sees Josh Allen throw the football 70 yards.
Do you ever notice, Mr. Moohead, when they hire all these new GMs, if you date back to 99, all the new GMs, the presidents that come in and all these new coaches, Cleveland Browns will have this big news conference, live. And I noticed every GM or every front office guy they hire, they'll just sit there for like 30 minutes. And Jimmy Haslam goes, I think we really got something here. Hired Sashi Brown, who came over from the Houston Astros or the New York Mets or wherever he came from. And he knows about numbers and he's really good with mathematics. Sashi, you got anything to say? And Sashi would be like, I think I got what it takes to turn this franchise.
Yeah.
And it's like they're all like the Three Stooges. They're like, boop, I'm waiting for boop,
Let's just sit here and suck each other's dicks. I mean, that's really what we have is this, and it's their way of trying to show that they're presenting a strong front or something. I have no idea. But yeah, I think John Dorsey knows what he's doing. I think that Hugh Jackson doesn't have a clue. He doesn't have a clue, and you're not going to pull out of a 1-31 hole by just, trying to make, big plays. I'll tell a funny story, and then I got to get going here because dinner's going to be waiting here. Back in the days of early video games, and I was an early video game guy. I was an Atari 2600 guy. This will give away my age, a ColecoVision guy, okay, an Atari 7800 guy, a Sega Genesis guy, hell, I went all the way back to the Commodore 128. I went back to the Commodore Amiga. I mean, I was the biggest video game player before it became all the rage, before there was online stuff. And of course, when you didn't have people to piss off online, which is really the point of playing video games online, is to stack your lineups and cheat as best you can. My wife and I would play sports games, and God bless my wife. She's a great human being, all right. And she was born in Manila in the Philippines, and she never really knew anything about football until she married me, because she had to watch the football on Sunday because I was a Browns fan. And so she would watch the football. So she kind of watched and learned as she went. So she would play one team and I'd play against her. And her offense was predicated on one bomb after another, And the poor girl. I mean, I felt bad for her because I was devising blitz schemes to get to the quarterback. And, what I would do is I would cover the guys who were short in the pattern. And she never had time to throw the ball down the field, but woof, and the quarterback would just get crushed, But that's what Huey's like. Huey is like my wife, except not a good human being and not attractive either, like my wife is. All right. And obviously can't swim because he hasn't jumped in the lake yet.
Huey's like 5'2", sitting in his chair. He's like, just trust me. Just trust me.
Yeah.
It takes time to figure this out. What did you expect?
God only knows what we're going to end up with. But all I know is that Tyrod Taylor is not going to be a guy who throws the ball deep with any great efficiency. And we've got to move the flag. You got to move the sticks, and if you don't do that, you've got the wrong quarterback on your hands. You've got to build a system that is correct with the talent that you have, and that means you've got to have better route runners. Because if you're going to run a precise offense that is predicated on short possession, safe, passes, guys have to be good route runners. Jarvis Landry is a good choice because he's very good in the middle of the field as a slot receiver, and he's proven that he can get open and he runs crisp patterns. But the thing is, I don't like Terrell Pryor because he's a former quarterback and he had a lot of gifts, but he's not a good route runner. Josh Gordon has great hands, but he doesn't always remember the playbook depending on what mental state he's in. And what I've seen of Corey Coleman, we're going to need more. We're going to need a bigger boat.
Mr. Moohead, if you draft a quarterback at all in this draft, do you see the Browns cutting Hogan or Kessler?
Kessler, because this is what I've learned from my experience working with people who are dyed-in-the-wool people like John Dorsey. He has not gotten the bad taste of Kevin Hogan out of his mouth yet. He was the one who drafted Kevin Hogan, for Kansas City, and he didn't work out. And I just know these guys, and he's going to try to make it work out. He's going to prove this if it's the last thing he does. So Kessler will be the odd man out. But, honestly, I don't think anybody's going to really cry about it because if either of those two guys are playing, we're headed toward 0-16 or 1-15 again.
I hope that's not the case. I hope Tyrod Taylor stays healthy because unlike my Texans, we had 21 starters who were injured at some point of the season. And your roster is only as good as your injuries. So once those injuries start piling up, it really affects wins, losses, your productivity on the field.
Wow. I'm looking at Matt Ogden. Message retracted. He retracted 2 messages. Sorry, Matt. When is Hugh scheduled to jump in the lake? Lake Erie perch season, I'm hoping. so somebody will get him. Brian Hallman, can we see if stoning him to death is optional? Well, actually, just send him over to Daktar's house and he'll get stoned. All right. Let's see what else. Brian Hallman, remember IntelliVoice? Oh, God almighty. Now we're really going back into – there are some old guys in this chat room. That's scary. And Ron Shane has now made 3 dead rabbits the new war cry for Moohead Radio. 3 dead rabbits.
So, Mr. Moohead, how long does Hugh or Wade Jackson last before you throw him in the water? Assuming he can't win another game, how many games does he go this season?
4. If he's 0-4, he's gone. And Dorsey already has somebody in mind. I'll guarantee it. He don't want Way around.
Now, if you fire Wade, do you just bring somebody up like Greg Williams, or are you going to fishnet somebody else in the open market, whoever that may be?
Dorsey is smart enough to know that he's got his eyes on somebody. I
have one last question for you.
Yep.
Is this a lawsuit with Jimmy Haslam and the minority truckers thing? Will this be solved before the season? Will this be solved during the season? I mean, I'm not expecting you to know that, but what would your guesstimates be on that?
Well, what I know is that I believe in April, all parties, there will be no new parties allowed into the fray. So I know that much, but as far as resolution of this, I have no idea whatsoever.
How did he rip these truckers off? I'm not a native to Cleveland. I know apparently he ripped off a bunch of angry truck drivers. Trucking
companies who he promised rebates to, and they didn't cut the checks and give the rebates. I mean, it was he just robbed people of money. He got people to spend money with Flying Pilot J, and then on the basis of rebate checks that the companies were promised, he didn't pay them out.
Damn, I'm surprised he's not sitting in the county jail right now.
Well, so are a lot of people, and I think that, and meanwhile, he's got a bunch of guys making racist comments about the football team he bought. This is, really great. Only in Tennessee, can this type of thing happen. So,
and that's why you mentioned about if they fired Wade Jackson, they would be, quote, whitening up the team. That's why they're kind of hesitant on firing him.
I honestly believe that plays into it somehow, because right now, the image of Flying Pilot J, besides being a ripoff company, is that they have a racist management group inside that building. And if you're going to bounce Sashi, if you're going to bounce Sway at the same time, then it's going to be like, let's put it this way. You've heard of Tide detergent?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, this would be apartheid detergent. It would automatically separate your whites from your colors. I think that at this point, if you got rid of those guys, it would look like the white purge. It would look like a bunch of people wearing Doc Marten boots were moving into the front office. So I think that he has to be careful.
So the question is, one last question. If with the lawsuit and everything, if this lawsuit goes on into the season and even to the end of the season, does Wade Jackson still keep his job despite a 0-8 start or whatever? Or do you think after 4 games, regardless of where the lawsuit is, at that point, he's gone regardless?
Well, I mean, if he went 0-8, for God's sakes, I mean, you know what that's like? That would be like you found yourself a girlfriend. How many dates without being able to achieve an erection? How long would the relationship last? I mean, yeah, wah, 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 wah. I mean, if you didn't have the goods, man, I guarantee you, she wouldn't be around long. And 0-8, I mean, that would be 0-24. I mean, no, I can't see it going on that far. I'll give him 20. So at 0-4, he'd be 0 for 20. And I think, and at that point, he would be what, 1 for 35? Is that right? 1 and 30.
The Jacksonville previous coach, what was that? Gus Bradley was like 12 and 54 or something.
Yeah, and he was positively brilliant compared to Huey. So, but I'd give him 4 games. But maybe they'd have an interim coach in mind, but they'd have to get him the hell out of there. And
gone if Wade Jackson's gone.
No, I don't think that Greg Williams and Huey are even tied at the hip. I don't believe those two men don't know one another from Adam.
Because with Greg Williams, he plays those guys like 15, 20 yards back, and they're getting beat by 50-yard touchdowns. I don't get that,
Well, I don't think that Greg Williams did that when he was in New Orleans. I think that basically what he was saying is we have guys who can't run. They're slow. I'm going to put them back there, and we're going to try to keep everything in front of them. It's really bad. It's like, what do you do if you take a job with International House of Pancakes and you find out one of the ingredients in their pancakes is cow urine? What do you do at that point? I mean, that kind of spoils the pancake. I mean, if you got a team with no speed in the secondary, it limits what you can do. And then he's not going to be able to blitz and put pressure on people when he has guys. I mean, they couldn't cover receivers, let alone make it from the backfield into the, or from the Brown side of the field into the backfield of the quarterback. Couldn't make up the ground. They're not fast enough.
Mr. Moohead, it's like if Jimmy Haslam hired you for GM right now and said, I want you to turn around this company with the players, with everybody you got in the front office. You see Hugh Jackson, just trust me. And you see Greg Williams playing 30 yards back. He's like, well, our players are too slow. And then you look around, you see Fat Shelton and all these other guys. You're just like,
No, let me tell you something. I passed on a lot of radio station opportunities. My dad had a saying, you kiss a lot of frogs before you find the prince. And I kissed a lot of frogs in the radio business. I can tell you cities. I was in Rochester, New Hampshire, which is part of Portsmouth, Dover, Rochester, the Tri-Cities in New Hampshire. I was in, down in southeast Connecticut, which is where, interestingly enough, the casino, there were 2 casinos that went up in that area later on. I saw that as a growth area, but the stations were the wrong groupings of stations, and that was, New London and Norwich. in Stonington, Connecticut. I was in Yuma, Arizona, and I think a tumbleweed ended up halfway up my ass. I kissed a lot of frogs before I found the princes that I purchased. So, yeah, that's the nature of all business is some things work, some things don't. But you got to know what to choose and what to select.
So, Mr. Moohead, one last question. How many wins do you see the Browns getting this year, regardless of what happens?
I would be thrilled with 5. I think it's more likely 2. The last team that went 0-16 had 2 wins the following year. Right. That was the Detroit Lions. Yeah. And they actually crucified Marty Morningweg, and that became the biggest promotion in their stadium was Crucify Marty Morningweg Day, where on a Sunday they just put a big crucifix up and they killed him Christ style.
Nice.
Don't take me seriously. All right, we got to get going, man. You've milked an hour and 20 out of me, buddy.
It's a good show today.
All right. Thanks for your help, and I hope you keep showing up. I appreciate it.
Just wish we could add the other guys, but it's all good if you guys are watching. Shout out to Bronk in the UK. Shout out to Michael, and a shout out to Metcalf.
All right, man. Thanks a lot for jumping in.
Thank you again, brother.
You bet. Bye-bye. Yeah, that's right, Dactar. Groton. That's where the Navy, right? The nuclear submarine was based in Groton. That was that part of the area. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this edition of Moohead Radio. Back again on Friday. We'll see what happens next. Free agency is here. The question is, what are the Browns going to do? See you on Friday. Bye-bye.